Hold your head up. Keep your head up, moving on. Hold your head up. Keep your head up, moving on. Hold your head up. Keep your head up, moving on. Hold your head up. Keep your head up. All right.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome back. I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend there. I know that I sure did. We will be doing call-in tonight. I know last time I said that was the last call-in, but I did look into locals and it looks like people have to pay for it. And I don't want to make people pay to call in. I think that's ridiculous. So we're going to continue to do call-in until I figure out which alternative I'm going to use. But shout out to Roger Meadows because he did send me some alternatives. I just need time to go through them and then we'll go from there. But welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Welcome, guys. Again, I hope you guys had a great weekend. I love these long, I guess not really long, but these 3-day weekends that pop up every now and then. But shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. We have 5 stories tonight and 1 ballot measure. There was one of the stories I couldn't fit on the thumbnail, but it's a really important one, and I do hope more people will cover it. And we will do call in tonight after the show. But first and foremost, I want to give shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on, guys? Welcome. Shout out to radical leftist extremists. Sabby, the Vanguard smeared you. Please check it out. I don't care. I really forget about the most part. Shout out to P. Smith, who's a Sabby member, says, I sent some of your clips to a friend. She's loving your show now. Well, thank you so much. What's up? Dabby Dab says, LOLs at 2 clowns, 1 shoe, the Vanguard. Wow. Shout out to Hannah G says, I saw that viral video. That video is creating quite a buzz in reference to conversation around domestic violence. And we're gonna get into it with that video. Shout out to Miguel says, peace. Greetings, Willow. Hi, Sabby. Sounds like tonight's going to be an interesting one. It will be. Greetings, Larez says, sup, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Bernie, from disappointment to traitor to disgrace. Oh, what viral vid? Dems really going to force people to accept Kamala? Smash the like, y'all. We'll get into that story. They're finally saying the quiet part out loud. Shout out to David says, hey, all. Greetings, Kill Your E. Gorger says, hello, comrades. Shout out to Ben, who's a Sabby member, says, yeah, the Vanguard boys are talking shit again. I'm not pleased. Yeah, I don't even watch the Vanguard. I don't even watch it. It's not worth my time. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Tuesday. Greetings, Red 6 says, hello, Sabby. Shout out to Ilhanner says, hi, Miguel. What's up, Notori sends lots of love. Shout out to Mark Sabby. I just heard Bernie say we should have a people's agenda. He should call it the "this time we really mean it" agenda. I know, right? Shout out to Dwayne, who's a Sabby member, says doobie doobie doo. Greetings, Lee Ford, excuse me, sends music. Shout out to Rick, says, hey, y'all. What's up, Lucy? Says, hello. Shout out to Simone, says, hey, I'm on time. And I'm always there when you call, and I'm always on time. I remember that song. What's up, Randy? Good evening, Sabby family. Shout out to Net Rando, says, cheers from Canada, fam. Canada. I have not made it to Montreal yet this year, hoping to do so, but I love to go up there. Shout out to Dimma Dixon says, hey, everybody. Greetings, Venti Cafe says, hello, peeps and Sabby. Shout out to Casey, sends solidarity and fire. And what's up, CBC voter, says, happy Tuesday, Sabby Sabs. Hello, CBC. And greetings, Sonia says, hi. Shout out to Kevin, says, hey, Sabby. Kevin from the Oregon coast. I've never been to Oregon. Never been there. But I did have a roommate back in the day when I lived in New York who was from Portland, Oregon. And I was like, well, what's there to do in Portland? And he told me there's this place called Voodoo Donuts. So if I'm ever out there, I guess I'll have to check out that donut place. I'm not big on donuts, but I'll do it. If I'm out there, I'll do it. Shout out to you. Ashura says, what's the update for the call-in alternative? I need my Sabby fix. I haven't figured it out yet, but we will do call-in tonight. We'll continue on call-in until I figure that out. And shout out to Desert Mantis says, welcome back, Sabby. And shout out to Corey says, hi all. Corey is also a Sabby member. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. You're out here doing the damn thing and keeping the lights on around here. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, there's also Sabsters, and there's Sabbies. And of course, don't forget about those members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Mary Fitzgerald, Alex Woolbright, and Diana George. Thank you. Thank you so much and welcome. Woolbright is an interesting name. It's interesting. I've never heard that name before. All righty. So let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail to show you what we're going to discuss tonight. I am pumped. I hope you are too. All right. Let's get into the thick of it. Tonight, we are discussing Russell Brand Ukraine alerts. Very important message there coming from Russell Brand. And I think that this is something that those of us at RBN, we were saying this for quite some time, but now there is someone who is actually higher up in the ranks, so to speak, that is going to confirm what we've been saying about this conflict with Russia and Ukraine all along. So that's very important for people to hear. We're also going to discuss Bernie Sanders doubles down in reference to support for Joe Biden. We're going to get into that interview that Bernie Sanders had on Face the Nation. Very important story there. I'm also going to discuss, well, folks, they're finally letting the cat out the bag. Joe Biden replacement ? And why is Kamala Harris there in that square? I know we mentioned Gavin Newsom multiple times, but now I have more information for you. And if it is Kamala, you guys better get ready because it's about to get crazy up in here. And we're also going to discuss this viral video, which is making a lot of buzz on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram. And what would you do if you were in that particular situation? And I also have another story about a 93-year-old woman who is being sued by real estate developers for her own land. Very important story. It could happen to you. And we'll cover that Utah ballot measure as well. Thank you so much, Roger, for the super chat. Dag, Sabby, I have to go back and tell Case, Lucy, and Brandy, who I told was your last call in, to come back. I know. I'm sorry. I know. Locals is I don't want to make people pay to call in. I don't agree with that. That's kind of weird to me. All right, let's go ahead and get started with this first story. Well, folks, for a while, we have been saying that Joe Biden is probably going to be replaced at some point, right? Because he has been showing signs of cognitive decline over the past year. They never really stated that publicly. Multiple times when politicians were questioned about whether or not Joe Biden was going to run, politicians like Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders, AOC, etc., they all said that Biden is going to run. And not only that, but Simone Sanders said that Biden is going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. Well, now it seems that things may be changing. I want to go to this section here from NBC News, and then I have two video clips that I want to show you. Shout out to Case Study QB for that there are already talks off the record to have a replacement for Joe Biden. But first, this article here from NBC News brings a lot of bells, I think, if you're paying close attention to voter turnout, because it appears, according to NBC News, Democratic elites struggle to get voters as excited about Biden as they are. Imagine that. When party elites look at President Joe Biden, they see the second coming of Franklin D. Roosevelt. When voters view the president, many see an old man. Let's go on. The Democratic elites who hold high office, raise the money, and pound the campaign message are all in when it comes to President Joe Biden's reelection. But they're not oblivious to an uncomfortable reality. Their own voters aren't sold. Now, I want to pause here and say, when we talk about Democratic elites who hold high office, the reason why they're behind Joe Biden is because he's status quo and he protects the status quo, and he's corporate. So he's willing to go along with what corporations want, what the donors want, and what the military industrial complex wants. That's why they're willing to go behind him. So again, we have to continue to reiterate that message. They're not getting behind Joe Biden because they think he's a nice guy. They're not getting behind Joe Biden because of his policies. They're getting behind Joe Biden because he follows the status quo and he supports corporate donors. I'll say the elephant in the room. This is coming from Minion Moore, chairman of the 2024 Democratic Convention. People talk about his age, but you know what? I come from a family where age is wisdom, knowledge, participation, experience. I would rather have Joe Biden on this field at this time than any president. A quirk of the 2024 presidential cycle is the chasm that's emerged between the party establishment and rank and file voters. For Democrats, more than half don't want to see Biden run again. Biden isn't about to drop out. And indeed, Democratic leaders have engineered it so that he's on a glide path to the nomination at the party convention next year in Chicago. They readily concede that in their own conversation with voters, they hear doubts about whether the 80-year-old Biden is up to the job and the party's best chance to hold the White House. Their response, get over it. Do you see how they talk to the voters? Get over it. They don't care about the voters' concerns. They go on to say, and this is very telling, what I tell people is he's going to be the nominee and that's it. So this is how they treat us. He's going to be the nominee and that is it. I don't care what the voters want. I don't care what you guys want. We've selected Joe Biden. The DNC has selected Joe Biden, and that's how it's going to be. Now, how can you read this article and read that statement and still believe that we have a true democracy in this country? You can't unless you want to ignore it. It goes on to say the notion of someone else bursting out, that's a pipe dream. Rank and file Democrats may react to Biden with a collective meh, but party leaders say they are loath to see a genuinely open and competitive race for the nomination. History suggests that would be a mistake, they add. And they give the example of Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy. And I have something to say about this. The last Democratic president to face a serious primary challenge was Jimmy Carter, who defeated fellow Democrat Ted Kennedy and then went on to lose the general election to Ronald Reagan in 1980. A contested primary would hamper Democratic chances next fall, party leaders argue, adding that ditching Biden for an untested alternative carries a set of risks that the party can't accept with so much at stake. Pay attention to the vocabulary. They're using words like untested. That shows you they're not willing to try anything new. It has to already be tested. It has to already be proven, right? The other piece here about Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy, I want to say something about that primary race. Ted Kennedy, if you go back and you read the articles and you watch the videos, there's several up on YouTube, Ted Kennedy actually had a good chance. But where did Ted Kennedy go wrong? There's two main issues. Number one, there was the incident in Chappaquiddick where Ted Kennedy, we've talked about this before, where Ted Kennedy was drunk driving, accidentally drove the car into the lake. The woman who was in the passenger seat died in the car. I can get into more details about this another time, but I've talked about this situation multiple times on this show. Long story short, the woman did not die from drowning. She died from suffocation, which means that if Ted Kennedy would have contacted 911 the moment the car went into the water, instead of going back to the party and going to sleep, she actually would have survived. That's a whole nother story. Chappaquiddick. And two, there was an interview with Ted Kennedy, and he was asked this one simple question. Ted, why do you want to be president of the United States? And Ted could not answer that question. And that really sends off red flags. You can still find that interview on YouTube, by the way. So just an FYI. But they're already telling you, again, they want something that's already been tested and has proven to work, not something that is untested, not something that may hurt them and not help them. And my thing is this. Just because you win the primary, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win the general. So this idea that they have that, well, if this primary challenge against Joe Biden, if there is a Democrat primary debate, that's actually just going to hurt Joe Biden. He may still beat them, just like Jimmy Carter beat Ted Kennedy, which they will make sure that happens. The DNC will make sure they give most of the superdelegates to Joe Biden. But then their argument is that in the general, Joe Biden would lose to Donald Trump, just like Jimmy Carter lost to Ronald Reagan. Now, there's other issues with that presidency as well. Apparently, from what I understand, people were not happy with the economy during that Carter presidency at that point in time. And then you had Ronald Reagan, who came in with the whole Make America Great Again. Yes, that did not come from Donald Trump. Came in with the whole Make America Great Again, talked about the working man, talked about trickle down economics, which we all know did not work, but gave people hope economically. And Ronald Reagan came in, and not only did he win, but he blew Jimmy Carter out the water, if you look at the votes. But that's coming from NBC News. Now, recently on CNN, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. He says, off the record, Democratic operatives and donors tell potential Biden replacements to get ready. Can't make this up. Case Study QB is out there doing the damn thing. Let's go ahead and jump into this first clip here from CNN. Listen to this.
The president has announced his reelection. He's raising money and he's opened a campaign headquarters in Wilmington. Still, the questions persist as to whether he's really in it, even among Democrats. Almost all are spoken off the record. As CNN's Edward Isaac Dover recently reported, the conversations keep happening. Quiet whispers on the sidelines of events, texts, emails, furtive phone calls, as top Democrats and donors reach out to those seen as possible replacement presidential candidates. Get ready, they urge. In conversations that aides to several of the people involved have described to CNN, despite what he has said, despite the campaign that he's announced, President Joe Biden won't actually be running for re-election.
We're going to pause here for just a second, and we're going to go back to this statement here. Listen to this. Despite the campaign that has been announced, President Joe Biden won't actually be running for re-election. Now, these are conversations that apparently have happened behind closed doors. Somehow CNN became privy to this information. I don't know how they got this information, but it's out there now. So this was not reported first on independent media, this message here. It came out on CNN, and a lot of people have seen this. Let's continue.
Be running for re-election. They feel like time is already running out, and that the lack of a more robust campaign activity that they want to see is a sign that his heart really isn't in it. Part of the problem is that his vice president is not a ready-made solution. Kamala Harris's standing is worse than Biden's. Her approval is at about 40%. She was tasked with responsibility for voting rights and dealing with the origin of border security issues, but has little to show for either. And many Democratic polls have not forgotten that she left the 2020 nomination race before a single vote was cast, having distinguished herself only with an attempted takedown of Biden over busing.
Okay, so that is the first clip, and I want to add something in here before we get to the second clip. Kamala Harris is the vice president. And here's something I want people to reconsider. We know we've talked before about them possibly looking at like a Gavin Newsom, so to speak, but here's the reality. The Democratic Party is screwed regardless of what they do in reference to replacements, right? Because here's the thing. If they were to bring in Gavin Newsom, let's say that did happen, then there are going to be people, the Kesheev supporters of Kamala Harris, who are going to complain that a Black woman was looked over. Don't believe me? Let them do it. Wait for it. She was looked over. That's not fair. So they'll anger that side. If they choose to go with Kamala Harris, seeing how she's the vice president, there is a segment of the Democratic Party population that is not going to agree with that because they feel that Kamala Harris is not competent enough to be president of the United States. I mean, same with Joe Biden. But in reference to experience, in reference to her situation with the border, which is her task, that's her duty, is the border. The way that Kamala Harris has appeared on interviews since she's been vice president, giving word salad responses to some of the questions that I felt were very simple questions. There is a segment of that part of the population that feels she is not up to the task. So either way, they're going to upset people. And I believe this is the reason why they're taking their time to say, you know what, Joe Biden isn't going to do this, someone else is. But there's also another issue. There's the primary calendar. Different states have different deadlines in reference to when you can file to run for president. And this is something that the Democratic Party is going to face in reference to a Biden replacement. Listen to this clip. Also, shout out to Case Study QB, where they address the calendar deadline in key states, particularly one that has ranked choice voting now, which is Nevada. Let's go on. Case is doing the thing.
If he decides not to run, he'll want to leave his party in the hands of whoever has the best chance to beat Trump, should Trump be the 2024 GOP nominee. But is that Harris? And should she have to prove it? Gavin Newsom seems to be doing what's necessary to keep his prospects alive, going so far as to agree to debate Ron DeSantis. We'll see if that really comes to pass. Surely he'd not be the only other Democrat besides RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson who'd compete for the nomination. The longer Joe Biden is an announced candidate, the better it is for Kamala Harris that any change of heart comes late. That way, the potential field is frozen. And she's...
Do you hear what he just said? The longer they wait to make any changes, the better that is for Kamala Harris, because the field is frozen, meaning some of these states, a lot of these states, the deadlines will have already have passed. So they'll have no choice but to give it to Kamala Harris. And this is something I was trying to warn people about when people were like, well, we got to get Biden because we don't want Trump. And I totally understand that. I understand people frustrated and don't want another Trump. But Joe Biden's vice president pick of Kamala Harris is not proving to be a good idea. The reality is, even if we don't even get to 2024 yet, if something happened to Joe Biden, let's say Joe Biden fell ill or something like that, Kamala Harris, as the vice president, she would have to step in. So who you choose as vice president is very important. These things do happen. Let's continue, and he's going to get to the calendar deadlines.
Better placed to be a quick stand-in. If Biden wants to foster competition, he'll have to remain neutral with Harris in 2024 as Obama was with him in 2020. And he'll need to stand down with enough time for others to raise money and get on primary and caucus ballots. That clock is ticking. Amazingly, the first state filing deadline for primary candidates is October 16, just 6 weeks away, and it's Nevada, a key state that Biden won by fewer than 34,000 votes, a couple of percentage points, and Hillary Clinton won in 2016 by only 27,000. Another swing state, Michigan, has a December 8 deadline. As of today, many states have yet to finalize their filing deadlines, including the 3 early states of South Carolina, Iowa, and New Hampshire.
But those states that he mentioned, Nevada, remember that was the state, that was one of the states that Bernie Sanders won in the Democratic primary of 2020. He beat Joe Biden in Nevada, right? Michigan, Democrats have been struggling with Michigan for the past couple of years. Now, Joe Biden was able to pull it off in 2020. Will he be able to pull it off this time around in 2024, considering the fact that the economy is a big issue for a lot of people? And so we have to think about Michigan, and we have to think about there's a lot of unions there. Right now, the UAW just agreed to go on strike. So that's the United Auto Workers. So this is going to be very telling in reference to whether or not the Democratic Party can hold on to Michigan again this time around, or will it flip again because of the economy to the Republican Party?
But by year's end, at least 13 more will have locked in their candidate slates, including 10 with primaries on Super Tuesday, which is March the 5th.
Pause here. I want you to see this calendar. If we're looking at November, we have Alabama and Arkansas deadlines. And then in December, this is a doozy. Texas, Colorado, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Virginia, California, North Carolina, Vermont, Louisiana, Ohio, and of course, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of states here in December. So I'm going to wage a bet here, and I'm going to wait to see if there is going to be some type of change where like a Gavin Newsom coming in, maybe we'll hear some buzz right before December. But I don't know. All I know is these conversations that are had like behind these closed doors or off the record conversations have now made their way to CNN, which of course gets a lot more views than I do. So now more Americans are privy to this information that, wait a minute, it looks like they may not have Biden run at all. After all, it looks like we may get Kamala Harris or we may get a Gavin Newsom. And it'll be interesting to see how that influences voters come 2024.
So unless RFK Jr. suddenly surges, that doesn't leave a lot of room for a new candidate to launch a campaign, assemble a team, and make a real run for it. What the calendar makes clear is that time is running out for a Biden alternative other than Kamala Harris. So as Donald Trump tries to figure out how he can be in two places, a courtroom and a campaign trail, President Biden needs to make sure he's in this, come hell or high water.
So what's interesting also about this calendar is I just want to remind everyone of something. It's interesting how certain rules for thee, but not for me, right? Because during the Democrat primary debates in 2020, I remember Mike Bloomberg jumped into the race very late. very late. So I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm here to let you know that they're already starting to reveal that they may end up replacing Joe Biden with either Kamala Harris or a Gavin Newsom. Now, Kim Iverson talked about this a while back, and I held on to this clip because I said, I'm going to need this clip at some point, and that night has come. Kim Iverson had a prediction of how they would replace Joe Biden. And I think you need to hear what she says, because this is actually what I believe to be the more likely situation. Listen to this.
Is they are absolutely looking to get rid of him. And I think they also want to get rid of Kamala Harris while they're at it, because no one likes her either. And here's how I think they're going to do it. I do think they're actually going to be getting rid of Joe Biden. I don't think he's going to be the nominee in 2024, but I also don't think they want to have an election. I certainly don't think they want to risk someone like RFK Jr. winning. So I think the way they're going to do it is they're going to act like Biden is the guy all the way up through the primaries. When the primaries are over, they're still going to say Biden's the guy, that he defeated handedly RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and that Joe Biden is obviously the nominee. And then right before the convention, I think they're going to be moving him aside.
And honestly, that is what I think is most likely to happen. I think they're going to let him go all the way. Because remember, guys, they're not having debates. It's different. When we watch like the GOP debates, it's different. Like, yes, they still have more debates lined up. But for the Democratic Party, there's no debates. So we're not going to see Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. and Joe Biden and whoever else on the stage debating each other up into the election. So that's why if they wanted to slide someone in, they could easily do that without so much pushback. Do you think that most people in this country even know that Joe Biden has primary challengers? Most people aren't even paying attention to politics right now. So most people don't even know. And I think that's another big part of the problem. Most people right now are not paying attention. Most people will tune in 2024. And if there aren't debates, then it's just people still thinking that it's just Joe Biden. And that's where those of us in independent media, we have to continue to raise that noise. We have to continue to tell people, no, there are people running against him, whether it's RFK, Marianne, Cornel West, etc. We have to continue to relay that message to people. And we need you guys, those of you that are part of the audience, to tell people that message as well, because I'm serious. If there's no debates, most Americans will have no clue, especially if they're not even watching mainstream media, and they'll just think it's Joe Biden. Then they'll go to vote. If RFK Jr. and Marianne don't drop out, when it's time to vote, they'll go see the ballot like, who are all these other people on here? I didn't know those people were running. That's the thing. Most people are not in this space. Most people are not watching me. They're not watching Kim. Most people are not watching independent media at all. And the people who are tuned in to media, most of them are tuned into the CNNs and the MSNBC, et cetera, right? So let's just keep this in mind. CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, they're giving RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson attention in interviews now. Maybe Fox News will still continue. But next year, is CNN and MSNBC going to continue to give these interviews to RFK and Marianne Williamson, or will they try their best to suppress them to make it seem like there's no challengers running against Joe Biden? These are questions that we have to ask ourselves. I'll let Kim finish, but I think she has a really good prediction here.
And they're going to be actually, in my guess, if I were a betting woman, I would say that they're going to be putting in Gavin Newsom is how they're going to do it. And the way they're going to do this, look, they don't want to have an election. They're not interested in an election, a primary. They just want to put in who they want to put in, because they don't want to risk somebody, like I mentioned, RFK Jr., winning that nomination. They don't want to have an actual battle of Democrats. They don't want to have debates with RFK Jr. and Gavin Newsom or whoever else might be Cory Booker or whoever, Kamala, maybe she's, I still want to try, or whoever else they think might be trying to run for president, Pete Buttigieg, whoever it might be. They don't want to actually have those debates. They don't want to actually have a primary. They just want to put in the person they want to put in. And we saw that even with Joe Biden himself getting the nomination the last time around. And we saw when they chose Kamala Harris, they tried to shove her down our throats. They were saying, this is the next president of the United States. We're finally going to have a woman. She's going to be a woman of color, and you're going to like it. And so they were trying to parlay her into the presidency through the vice presidency, but it didn't work because nobody liked Kamala Harris. And when she got into that role, people liked her even less and less and less. And they saw that she has no leadership skills whatsoever when it comes to leading a country. And her approval ratings have just absolutely tanked. She's less likable than even Joe Biden, if that's even possible. So they need to get rid of both of them. They're not going to be able to just move Biden aside. They're not going to be able to, they're in a pickle because they can't replace Kamala Harris as his running mate.
Right.
Who would they replace her with? And that looks terrible. After they tout it, they're propping up, we've got the woman of color. There's no way they could replace her.
And this is why who you choose for vice president is actually important. This is why that matters. This is why even when we vote for the president of the United States, we need to pay attention to their running mate. So we have questions about who they selected as their running mate, like Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine, for example. We should be a little bit more hesitant to just pick them just because the thing is, anything can happen where the president may have to step down, etc. And now you have the vice president is now president of the United States. So we're now in that scary predicament that some people imagine would happen where what if Kamala Harris had to step in?
They'd have to find another woman of color. And even then it'd be very awkward. I mean, maybe they tossed around in their minds, Stacey Abrams, maybe in their minds, but again, not a national figure that people identify with or gravitate to. They've tried. So how are they going to get out of this dilemma that they're in? How are they going to get Joe Biden to move aside, get Kamala Harris to move aside, and get somebody else in? And their only strategy is to not hold a primary, but instead go straight to the convention, have Joe Biden suddenly, he says, okay, there's just too much going on with my family. I need to worry about my son and my family and my life.
Or his health. He could use his health as an excuse too.
So I am not going to run for another term. I'm sorry. You all expected me to. I know. Thank you. Love you. But I'm not going to be seeking a second term. Now, he's not going to step down because then that would mean Kamala Harris steps in, right? And they don't want that. So they're going to want him to ride out his term all the way to the end. But what they're going to want to do come that July convention is they're going to want him, after they give them the anointed one, their next anointed one, they're going to want him to campaign alongside that person, shaking hands, waving, saying, this is, I'm just getting too old. I said I would only do one term. Now I'm really thinking about that and realizing it. So I'm going to keep my promise. And here's the new person. Here's Gavin Newsom. And I want everybody to vote for Gavin Newsom. And he's the guy. He's the one we want. He's the one we love because he's super ultra establishment. And he's clearly the one that they have picked.
And he's also related to Nancy Pelosi by marriage, if you did not know. So there's that too.
To succeed Joe Biden. And it's their way of getting rid of Kamala Harris. Why? Because you can't have two of them from California, right? So it's going to be awkward. And Gavin Newsom's going to say, well, I'm from California. And so I need to get somebody from the East Coast. It's going to be a big chatter on CNN. You can see it now. Oh, well, they can't go with Kamala Harris. They can't have two people from California. They do need to have representation if they're going to be fair to the East Coast or Midwest representation.
And that's when they insert Michelle Obama. Because that is the problem. If Gavin Newsom slides in, well, then you can't still keep Kamala Harris. She's right. You can't have two from the same state. So who do you go towards? That's when they can slide into Michelle Obama. Get ready for it, guys. I don't know for sure that this would happen, but if it were me, and if I'm thinking about this shit strategically, I would think, you know what? Bring in Gavin Newsom, because also a lot of people know who he is. He is popular, although a lot of his residents in his state are furious with him because of the taxes, because of the cost of living, because of the homelessness issue, et cetera, et cetera. So I question if he could win his state, but they would probably make sure that he does, right? Because he's establishment. He has got a lot of friends up in high places. They'll make sure that shit works out. The donors would love Gavin Newsom, right? Because again, he is status quo. And you bring in Michelle Obama. Now, as much as more people are not happy with Barack Obama, believe it or not, a lot of people love Michelle Obama, including the Bushes. So if I thought about this strategically and I was trying to keep the status quo, that is how I would do it. Think about it. Now, I don't know if Kamala Harris, or excuse me, if Michelle Obama would actually say yes, because I know she does not like politics, does not like being involved in politics. But I don't know. I mean, we've seen this happen before with people who didn't like being a part of politics, but then next thing we know, they're running for office. But I'm telling you guys right now, if they brought in Gavin Newsom with Michelle Obama, that would really change the game. And we have to remember, a great job from Kim there. We have to remember that not everybody's thinking like us. In fact, most people are not. Most people are not thinking like some of us are, like, let's support someone other than Joe Biden, right? For those of you who want to support either Marianne or RFK Jr., for those of you who want to support Cornel West, I will be supporting Cornel West. I don't care who the Democratic Party runs. But the majority of Americans that are voting are not thinking the way that we are. A lot of them are thinking with, we don't want to get Donald Trump again. We're afraid. Some people still have Trump derangement syndrome, yada, yada. But the question is the economy going to be enough to convince voters this time around not to continue to give your vote to a party just because you're afraid of the opposition? We'll have to wait and see. All righty. Let me go ahead and answer some of these super chats. Thank you, NK. I don't trust anything that comes out of mainstream media as a scoop. If it's on mainstream media, the powers that be want it on mainstream media. That's a good point too, NK. And cute puppy. Oh, the puppy pictures. Thank you, Jack. Yesterday in your interview, Bree said RFK Zionism makes Marianne Zionism look downright good. Do you agree with that statement? I don't think either one of them on that position is good. I don't think either one of them is good on that position. I think the difference is, if you were comparing the two, it seems like RFK Jr. wholeheartedly is for, constantly defending the state of Israel, whereas Marianne has called out some of the atrocities that's happening to the Palestinian people in Israel. So I think that's the difference between the two. Even Marianne agreed with the two-state solution. I know she's been kind of changing her mind a little bit on that, but Mad Crab says, but what is going to be the excuse? Will they just say we can switch him out? We can do what we want to do. I think they could use his health as an excuse for him to be like, I'm out. Thank you, Julie. Tim Dillon was on Joe Rogan recently. Tim Dillon's funny. And said, Kamala talks in gypsy curses. Best description I've heard of her. He's funny. I don't know if you are you guys familiar with Tim Dillon? He says some funny stuff. And thank you, Brent. You are doing amazing, and I'm broke, but I believe in you. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. And shout out to Pikachu. I see the Pikachu picture. I love Pikachu. Oh man, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that you're broke, but I understand. Shit. These student loans going back into repayment. So, Alrighty, honey buns. Let's get into the next story. Now, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine You're 93 years old. And your family has owned land since like the 1800s. It belongs to you. Now imagine that real estate developers are suing you over your land. Well, that's exactly what is happening in South Carolina to a 93-year-old great-great-grandmother. I kid you not, guys. This is why we have to continue to push back against the status quo. Right now, they're coming for her. One day, they could be coming for you. We got to keep an eye on these developers. Let's go ahead and get into this story from CNN.
A dispute over legacy and land. That's happening right now on Hilton Island in South Carolina. Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. 93-year-old Josephine Wright is at the center of a lawsuit that's picked up attention nationwide. As development goes up around her home, she's literally in the middle of what developers hope could be a new home community. But for Wright, it's so much more. CNN's Diane Gallagher reports.
We are connected to this land. Our blood runs through these trees.
No matter what, we will keep this land. So this land's going to be here with us if it's going to be another 200 years. That's the way we look at it.
But not everyone has that same view. The serene marsh and sandy beaches of Hilton Head Island have been home to the Gullah Geechee community since before America became America.
Just want to explain what Hilton Head is for those of you who haven't been there. So I went to college in South Carolina. My parents retired in South Carolina, and Hilton Head, it's, beach town. There's also golf like courses there. A lot of the people who own homes there are pretty wealthy people. I don't want to say they're like billionaires or something, but pretty wealthy and pretty well-to-do. So it is very much desired land. And I want you to pay attention to these beachfront communities, because this is also happening here in Massachusetts as well, where they're trying to go to these beach towns that were working class towns. And these developers are coming into those towns and they're trying to buy up residences and property and land and make it so that this is a playground for the rich. Let's continue.
But today, community members say development threatens those families who still call it home.
Why should we give up such a precious gift that God has given us?
Josephine Wright has lived in this house on Hilton Head Island for 30 years. But she says her family's home has been on this land since the Civil War. Purchased by freedmen and passed down for generations. Her husband, a Gullah descendant, wanted to be sure to keep the land in the family after his passing.
I feel
so freedmen are African American descendants of slavery, for those who are not aware.
so much pride and comfort in knowing that this is where I will be for the rest of my life.
But the 93-year-old great-great-grandmother has felt little comfort here over the past few months.
This is when we start hearing the trees say boom, boom.
Wright is being sued by a company with plans to build 147 three-story townhomes along this Jonesville Road community, a historic Gullah Geechee neighborhood.
Our blood, sweat, and tears are in this land. My ancestors are buried here down at the end of the road.
Today, construction is closing in around Wright's modest home.
Has the developer at any point come to you to speak face-to-face about this?
No, I've never spoken to any one of them. They have never knocked on my door.
She says about 5 years ago, a woman did ask her about selling the land to an interested anonymous buyer for $39,000.
And I said, you insulted my intelligence.
Yep.
And would you give them that message?
That land is worth way more than $39,000. But, you know, this isn't just happening, obviously, like in South Carolina. This is happening all across the United States, where these real estate developers are coming in and they're making these low ball offers to people in the community, assuming they don't know any better and assuming they'll go for it and sell the land. And then, of course, they tear down what's there. They rebuild and make it into this new gentrified like palace of their own, so to speak. And then what happens is the people, whoever is left in that community, now it's unaffordable for them to stay there because they have made these expensive townhomes, or usually here it's condos. They build a lot of those. And then I say upper level professionals come in, like the tech industry peeps, they come in, they move into those condos, and that raises the value of the property. So the people who grew up in that area, now they feel like they're pushed out because they can't afford to stay there anymore. Especially those who own the homes, they'll continue to be hassled to sell. And those who are renting will continue to see their rent increase to the point where they may no longer be able to afford it. They'll see mom and pop businesses close down, and they'll build more chain restaurants, a juice bar. You see a juice bar run. You see a juice bar, a Whole Foods come in, and I hate to say it as much as I love breweries, but a brewery come in, it might be time to run because everything else in the community is going to increase.
Says her first communication with the company, Bailey Point Investment LLC, was being served legal notice, which alleges a satellite dish, a shed, and a portion of Wright's screened-in back porch are sitting outside of her property line, encroaching on theirs, according to their land survey. The lawsuit seeks removal, plus just and adequate compensation for its loss of the use and enjoyment of their property and expenses related to delays in development.
Bailey Point says that the corner?
That little corner is on their property.
So the issue is that corner?
Yes.
Wright has filed a countersuit alleging Bailey Point and their affiliates are using harassment and intimidation tactics to pressure her off the land. Now, Bailey Point has filed a response denying any harassment, as well as any previous offers to purchase her land. She has received an outpouring of support and donations, even from celebrities like Tyler Perry, Snoop Dogg, Fantasia, and NBA player Kyrie Irving. The town of Hilton Head just announced it is pausing all construction in line with their town code, refusing to issue Bailey Point building permits until the lawsuits are resolved.
Make no mistake, the reason why they're pausing all this is because, number one, it's on mainstream media, and two, celebrities came in to back her. Obviously, someone like Tyler Perry has a lot of pull, right? So this is important for people to understand, but this can happen to anyone, no matter where. It doesn't have to be in Hilton Head, South Carolina. It's happening right now in Salem, Massachusetts. There was a story I covered recently on the ground in Salem, Massachusetts, where real estate developers said, sorry, all of you elderly people and disabled people that live in this community, we're going to tear all this down and we're going to build like condos here. Oh, by the way, you may be able to come back and live here maybe a year from now. We'll keep some affordable units. It's happening all over. Now, here is something that when you want to talk about political parties, here is a situation where it really does not matter if you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter who's in office. This is happening in cities, in states that are Republican-led, that are Democrat-led. It doesn't matter because both parties give in to real estate investors because they protect their bottom line. And we have to start asking ourselves, like, when are we going to push back on this type of behavior? So this company here, Bailey's Cove, like subdivision, that's one. BlackRock has been doing this for years. BlackRock did this after the 2008 housing crisis, when people foreclosed on their homes because of the subprime mortgage crisis. And BlackRock bought those homes that were foreclosed. They renovated those homes, and then they jacked up the price. And that's the reason why a lot of you today cannot afford to buy a single family home unless somebody in your family dies and gives you one. And our country let that happen. Our administration let that happen. Barack Obama chose to bail out Wall Street, and they sat right there. Even after that, they let these companies come in and buy up these single family homes. So when people tell you that we have a housing shortage in this country, we ain't got no damn housing shortage. There's plenty of homes. There's vacant homes. The problem is the average person can't afford to live there because these real estate investors have increased the cost of the area and the homes. Let's continue.
But Josephine Wright isn't alone in her fight.
She speaks to the Gullah culture and the Gullah desire to fight back.
Luana Graves Sellers runs a nonprofit called the Low Country Gullah Foundation, focused on helping prevent land loss in the Gullah Geechee community. Her nonprofit estimates that since Hilton Head Island became a vacation destination after a mainland bridge was built in the 1950s, the Gullah Geechee have lost nearly 2/3 of their acreage, mostly due to rising property taxes and problems with something called heirs property.
How pervasive is that on this island now?
It's pervasive here, but it's pervasive throughout the South. And unfortunately, heirs property is the primary way that Black people in America are losing their land.
Heirs property is a type of land ownership where a single property may be inherited by multiple members of a family for generations after the original owner passes away. But there's often a lack of clear legal documentation, making families vulnerable to land loss when there are disagreements within the family over selling. In some of these cases here, the land is being purchased by developers.
Just look at this. This is one of the most peaceful areas.
And lost by the Gullah Geechee. But in the case of Josephine Wright, she's standing firm on her ground.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I've never backed down on anything that was right.
And we'll go ahead and stop it there. And I just want to say this, again, this was a story that I knew I had to cover because this is happening all across the country. And the thing is this, that woman is 93 years old. You shouldn't have to. When I think back to the 2008 housing crisis, all these elderly people having to fight to stay in their homes. At 93 years old, you shouldn't have to stress about anything, really. You should be able to relax and have peace of mind. And the fact that these developers will come in and try to steal your land, and then because you won't sell it to them, they're going to sue you. 93 years old. It is a cruel, cold real estate environment that we have in this country. And it didn't just start today. It's been a problem for quite some time, but they don't care that she's 93 years old. How cold do you have to be to sue a 93-year-old woman because she won't sell you her land? When I tell you this country, what is happening in this country, when I tell you that the problem is the people at the top and not so much the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, we have our differences when it comes to party politics. But when I tell you that we need to be cautious of what's happening with the people at the top, this is just another example. I wish her the best. Her GoFundMe is doing very well. So please share the story to other people. I want more people to know about this. Thank you so much. Deneen says any chance to create generational wealth will be denied to Black people. There have been harassing and scaring Blacks off the land they owned for centuries. This lady must win this suit. That's right. Please share the story, guys, so more people can know about it. Thank you, Sparky. In August, Nico House interviewed a Nigerian news editor. He said Nigeria's Western puppet president may not have control over the military who aren't interested in invading Niger for neo-colonialism. That's interesting. I actually am going to see if I can bring Nico back on, hopefully soon, to do a panel about Niger and France, because he's been covering a lot about that. Adriana says the big developers are trying to buy all the single houses they can. That's right. Lose. I'm reminded of a town in Connecticut in which they use eminent domain to snatch the homes in a working class neighborhood and handed it over to a pharma corporation. You guys see this? And Luz also says Kilo versus New London. That's the ruling. Well. Whose dad says, I'm surprised CNN is reporting this. I was too, actually. I was like, huh? I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger. Sab, you should write an article in Nader's new publication, Capitol Hill Citizen. Now, how I know before you even showed me that this was going to be a Black woman having her land taken away from her from wealthy, what? Having her land taken away from her from wealthy prospectors. Except today we call them real estate developers. They know that New Yorkers and Massachusetts, Connecticut people from the Northeast have been moving south to get away from a high cost of living. Yes, that's true. Thank you for the tip, DC. Are you familiar with Talage LLC? They've been several cases of companies under the Talage umbrella ousting homeowners in Massachusetts after their homes were auctioned without their knowledge and consent for unpaid property taxes. I recently stumbled upon this and realized their cases are shockingly similar to my dad's, who was evicted from my childhood home last year in Houston, despite the mortgage being paid off. You guys hearing this? I was not familiar with that, but I'll look into that. They find ways. And thank you, Sparky. In Georgia, we're called Geechee. Developers have been stealing land since before the Civil War by using corruption in government. Yeah, they go hand in hand. If you guys have not had a chance to do so, please go ahead and smash that beautiful like button for me. Thank you. That helps me out with the algo. And we're going to dive into this story here about Bernie Sanders. And I have something to show you in reference to a flashback as well, in reference to Bernie Sanders. I told you a couple of nights ago that Bernie Sanders was on this press tour trying to encourage people to come out and support Joe Biden. He also spoke out against Cornel West's third-party run. Bernie Sanders, I told you before, is a puppet, right? He's a puppet of the DNC. Well, now he's also been on Face the Nation, and he is telling people that if Joe Biden runs a progressive agenda, that Joe Biden will not only win, but he will win by a landslide. I'm going to pick apart some of the hypocrisy in this conversation that Bernie has, and then I'm going to take you to a flashback of something Bernie said in 2016 that's going to seem all too familiar, and it will tell you how this will go down. Let's go ahead and dive in.
And we now go to Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who is joining us from Burlington. Good morning, Senator Sanders. We appreciate you being here.
Morning, Bob.
Senator, President Biden is touting the latest jobs numbers, but your recent speech in New Hampshire painted a bleak picture of the nation's economic reality. When you met with President Biden at the White House in recent days, what exactly did you tell him, Senator? And did you warn him, like you warned in New Hampshire, that, quote, Democrats must reject the corporate wing of the party?
Well, Bob, what I have said publicly time and again is that President Biden and his administration have made some real progress in addressing issues that have not been dealt with in decades. We finally took on the pharmaceutical industry, and we're beginning to make some progress in lowering the cost of prescription drugs. A lot more has to be done. After years of talk, we finally invested in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, water system. Manufacturing is coming back in America.
Let me pause there for just a second. In reference to the pharma issue that Bernie is discussing about the prescription drug prices, remember a lot of the wins that came from that benefits people who are 65 and older. So just remember that, right? Especially when it came to the insulin issue. So they're still avoiding a large segment of the population there. And two, Bernie, let's not pretend like Joe Biden is the first person, or you were the first person to even talk about the issues with healthcare in this country, because we'll go back to, if I remember correctly, it's Teddy Roosevelt, I think, brought up universal healthcare. Universal healthcare has been talked about for decades in this country. So hold on one second, guys. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Like the power just did something weird, but I'm back. Hold on one second. Okay, yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I think the power went glitchy. Let me make sure I'm still here. Okay, yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. No, it wasn't you guys. Like the power like glitched. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. Oh, the fact that Teddy Roosevelt talked about that back then, and the fact that here we are in 2023 and we still don't have universal health care, that tells you something about this country and about corporate interests in electoral politics. Let's continue. Oh, I'm going to log back in again. Sorry. That's 102. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. The power went glitch for a second. Okay, there we go.
So I think we're making some progress, but everybody knows that for decades now, not just under Biden, not just under Trump, but for decades now, what we have seen in America is an economy in which the very, very wealthy are doing phenomenally well, while working families are struggling. Today, Bob, we don't talk about it much. We have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of the United States. This is way before Biden. But what we are seeing now is 60% of our people living paycheck to paycheck. We have a healthcare system which is totally broken. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We got 18 million households where people are spending 50% of their income trying to pay the rent or pay a mortgage. So we have some structural problems in America. The Biden administration has made some progress. We have got a long way to go. And what the Democratic Party has got to do is have the guts to take on corporate greed, which is unprecedented all over the economy. The people who own the large corporations are enjoying record-breaking profits. We got to create an economy that works for all, not just a few.
Now, here's where Bernie Sanders is just being ridiculous, right? Because Bernie Sanders knows that damn well that the Democrat politicians are not going to take on corporate greed because those are their donors. They're not going to take on Big Pharma because they're taking money from Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna. They're not going to take on, you know, this issue with student debt the way that they should because they're taking money from Sallie Mae. Like Bernie Sanders knows that. So for Bernie even to make that statement, he's just exposing himself. He knows, and we know because he taught us, and we've done our own research. He knows that the Democratic Party is corporate controlled. So why is he saying you guys got to have the guts to take on corporate greed? Because he knows they're not going to do it. This is all a game. This is all a game. Bernie knows the corporations aren't going to back down, and he knows the Democrat politicians are not going to back down. Bernie Sanders is playing people just like he did starting with 2016 when he first ran for president. Let's continue.
Senator, you met with the president. You discussed these issues. You just heard from Ambassador Haley. She was attacking Vice President Harris. Are Democrats doing enough to support Vice President Harris as she faces these kind of attacks?
Well, I think the issue is, are Democrats doing enough to win back a working class, which is leaving the Democratic Party? And what, in my view, Democrats have got to do is say, really, do you really want to vote for a Republican Party which wants to cut Social Security? We got to expand Social Security. Wants to cut Medicare? We have got to expand Medicare to include dental, hearing, and vision. We got a Republican Party out there that doesn't even recognize the reality of climate change. So I think, Bob, what this campaign should be about is a contrast between the ideas that work for the working families of this country and what the Republicans stand for, which is more tax breaks for billionaires and paying allegiance to the needs of corporate America, not ordinary Americans.
But
here's where Bernie Sanders is being disingenuous. Joe Biden continued some of Trump's tax breaks. Some of the tax breaks that Trump had for corporations, Joe Biden supported some of those tax breaks. He talks about the climate issue. Joe Biden approved the Willow Project. I don't remember Republicans approving the Willow Project. That happened under Joe Biden's administration. Yes, we need to do more in reference to climate. Yes, there's so many more things that we need to do in reference to the working class. But I remember sitting there and watching 8 senators, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent vote against the $15 minimum wage for people in this country. So the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Now, again, to Bernie Sanders, to him to call out the Republican Party, which is the obvious, that's the obvious to the American people. Why doesn't Bernie Sanders call out the Democrats that are voting the same way the Republicans are voting? Because Bernie Sanders' job is to convince you that the Democratic Party is the right one and the way to go, and that the Democratic Party is doing the right thing and is doing nothing wrong. He'll just say, oh, there's a couple things that they need to do here and there, but for the most part, we're on the right track. That's Bernie Sanders' job. His job is not to get you to challenge the Democratic Party. His job is to get you to be submissive to the Democratic Party by convincing you that they're going to change when he knows that they're not, because they're corporate owned, and then having you submit yourself to them. That's his job.
Is the administration doing enough? I listened closely to your speech in New Hampshire. The administration's recently taken action on marijuana, for example, but should it do more with executive power? It's taken action on prescription drug negotiations with Medicare, but should it do more? I mean, you're out there saying they should be tougher.
Yes. Bob, the answer is yes, it should. Some of it can be done through executive orders. A lot can be done through legislation. And what I think has got to happen, this is my own view, is I think what the president has got to say is give me at least 50 Democrats in the Senate, give me control over the House of Representatives. And by 50 Democrats, I mean real Democrats, not corporate Democrats like Manchin and Sinema.
What the fuck? Real Democrats, not corporate Democrats like Manchin and Sinema. The majority of the Democrats in the House and the Senate are corporate. The majority are. So what's the real Democrat? What's the real Democrat when what? You're the outlier, Bernie. You're the outlier. Like that's the part that's hilarious to me. And to only call out Manchin and Sinema, it hasn't just been Manchin and Sinema. There were other Democrat senators, particularly the guy from Delaware, Chris Coons. I think his name is Chris Coons. The senator from Delaware voted against $15 minimum wage. It's not just Manchin and Sinema. Those, again, are the obvious people to call out. And I told you guys this before. Bernie Sanders does this a lot. He'll call out the obvious players, but he won't call out the ones that a lot of people don't know about.
And if you do that, within 2 or 3 months, we're going to reform healthcare to move it toward a system which guarantees healthcare to all people, not just huge profits for the insurance companies. We're going to lower the cost of prescription drugs so that we're not paying any more than the rest of the world. We're going to rebuild our economy to work for ordinary people. And I think that's got to be the message. Contrast a progressive agenda for working people versus a Republican agenda.
So there's Bernie Sanders admitting to you that the Democratic Party has a Republican agenda, basically, is what he's saying. An agenda for progressive agenda for the working people versus a Republican agenda. Bernie Sanders knows this party is not going to change and do this, especially next time for the election. He knows that. Bernie's not stupid. You see, they sent Bernie on this tour. They said, Bernie, you're going to be the puppet. You go out across the country and do like you usually do and convince the voters that Joe Biden is the way to go, that they got to support the Democratic Party. That's why you see him popping up everywhere. That's why he was just in New Hampshire. That's why you see him on Face the Nation. That's why you saw him on Meet the Press. That's why you see him doing all this stuff. This is Bernie Sanders' job. And for him to sit here and say that Joe Biden, just say to people, just give me 50 more Senate majority, Democrat Senate majority, and give me, a Democrat House majority. We had those things. How many times? We had those things. We've had it under multiple Democrat presidents. We had the majority in the House when Joe Biden was elected. They still didn't pass shit for the working class people, for the most part, to speak. Some of the things that, in reference to working class people, some of the things that Joe Biden can do, he can do by executive order. When it came to canceling student loan debt, Joe Biden could have done that by executive order. So this is Bernie Sanders carrying weight and water for the Democratic Party again, instead of telling the American people, here are the things that Joe Biden can do right now by executive order. Why hasn't Joe Biden decriminalized marijuana federally? Why hasn't he? That's something he can do by executive order. Why? Because Joe Biden is still in bed with the police state. Because if you do that, what happens to the police in this country? Now they can't just stop people and say, I smelled weed in the car. This is a mess.
Senator, I know you don't like to talk politics, but you're the one who went to New Hampshire, an early primary state you've done very well in over the years. You support President Biden 100%. You've made that clear. But for any reason, if President Biden decides not to seek the Democratic nomination, is a run by Senator Sanders for the nomination on the table next year?
Bob, I think we spend too much time speculating. I think President Biden is going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And I think if he runs on a strong progressive agenda, he's not only going to win, he's going to win by a strong vote. And I'll tell you why.
Let's pause there. So there it is, folks. Bernie Sanders says if Joe Biden runs on a strong progressive agenda, he's going to win and win by a landslide. Let me tell you why that is a ridiculous statement from Bernie. You already have candidates that are running on a progressive agenda. So it's just, why does Bernie Sanders try to convince you that they're going to try to convince Joe Biden to run a progressive agenda when you already have candidates running on a progressive agenda? If Bernie Sanders had a spine, he would tell you to support the progressive candidates that are already running. If Bernie Sanders had a small spine, he would tell you support Marianne Williamson. She's running through the Democratic Party on progressive agenda. Now, I don't agree with Marianne's position on Israel and Ukraine, but if Bernie had a small spine, he'd do that. But if Bernie had a huge spine, he would tell you to support Cornel West, who is also running on a progressive agenda, who has the correct issue or the correct position in reference to Israel and Palestine. And he has the guts to run outside of this two-party system because he knows that both parties are corporate and he saw what happened to me. But Bernie Sanders isn't going to do that because, again, his job is to convince you that the Democratic Party is going to change. And when they don't, he gets you to be submissive to the party anyway because of the dangers of Donald Trump. You see why that don't make no sense? It's just like, if I walk into the kitchen and I'm going to make me a smoothie, which is something I do every day. I walk into the kitchen, I'm going to make myself the smoothie. And I'm looking and I'm like, man, I need spinach to put in my smoothie. I have spinach in the refrigerator that is fresh and ready to go. I have spinach fresh and ready to go in the refrigerator. That's like me not using the spinach that's already there and me saying, I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some new spinach. That doesn't make any sense. You already have those progressive. So why would Bernie Sanders do that? He would only do that because Bernie Sanders is just as much a part of the same establishment that he has tried to convince you that he's not a part of, that he tells you to push back and fight back against. Because if he was not a part of that Democrat establishment, I don't care if he's a registered independent. If he was not a part of that Democrat establishment, Bernie Sanders would have the spine and the guts to tell you to walk away from the Democratic Party, support Cornel West because he's got the right progressive agenda if you are progressive and you believe in those issues. He's just a part of the establishment.
Because when you look at a Republican Party, it's not only that you have a president, a former president who has been impeached twice, indicted 4 times. These are people who deny women in this country the right to control their own bodies. Really? Is that where we are in 2023? Not recognizing the reality of climate change, wanting more tax breaks for billionaires? That's what their agenda is. So I think that in any kind of serious campaign, President Biden and the Democrats will do quite well against that reactionary agenda.
What do you
hear this?
You say, Senator, though, to some of your longtime supporters who are frustrated because they don't believe the Biden administration's done enough, They may not share your view of how things have gone, and they're thinking about Cornel West, or they're thinking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. What's your message to them as they drift toward those others?
Well, my message to them is that we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history.
The same message he told us years ago. He uses this line every time, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. Same message. This is an unprecedented time in American history. This is the most important election of our lifetime, folks, for the 20th time in a row.
Donald Trump is not only a pathological liar, has not only helped wage an insurrection, if you like, to prevent President Biden from taking office.
Joe Biden is also a pathological liar. Joe Biden's going around telling people that he marched during the civil rights movement. He didn't. Bernie did. He's going around telling people he was around with Nelson Mandela. Joe Biden is a pathological liar as well. But Bernie Sanders isn't going to tell you that.
Not only is denying American democracy, moving against American democracy. So I think at this moment, Bob, we have got to bring the progressive community together.
So Bernie Sanders' response to what's left of his support of his base is Trump is a pathological liar. We got to protect democracy. Vote for Joe Biden. That's all you got? That's it?
So you know what? We're going to fight for a progressive agenda, but we cannot have 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House.
We're going to fight for a progressive agenda. So Joe Biden took office 2021. Why do you have to fight for it? Think about this, guys. Why does Bernie Sanders have to fight for a progressive agenda? If Joe Biden is on the side of the workers and he really cares about the working class in this country, Mr. I'm Union Joe. I've always supported unions. Why does he need to be convinced?
Do you worry about the progressive vote staying home?
I think if the Democrats come up with a strong agenda that speaks to the needs of senior citizens in this country, and that means raising Social Security benefits, expanding Medicare. If we speak to the needs of young people, and that is having a lot to do with student debt, if we demand that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes, if we come up with a progressive agenda, I think we're going to win and win big. And when we win big, we have to make it clear that we stand with the working class of this country against the kind of corporate greed that we now see.
So I call BS because they do not stand with the working class people. Again, remember who tore down the railroad workers trying to go into a strike? Who prevented that? The squad members, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, and Joe Biden supported it. He says we have to have a progressive agenda. Just because you have an agenda doesn't mean they actually are going to get those things done or they want to get those things done. How many times have you gone to meetings and there's an agenda in the meeting and you don't get through all the items on the list, or you get through all the items on the list? And next is to do the task. Who's going to actually do these tasks? And those items on the list still are not accomplished. They're not implemented. They're not done. You can have an agenda. Just because you have an agenda doesn't mean it's actually going to be done. Politicians have had agendas for years. But I want to show you, because Bernie has done this before. Now I want to take you back 6 years ago. 2016, actually more than 6 years ago. This video was uploaded 6 years ago. But I want to take you back to 2016 when Bernie Sanders was on Morning Joe. And this is when he's already out of the race. And it's now Hillary versus Donald Trump. You've heard this before. Listen to this message from Bernie Sanders.
Clinton doing better.
Well, what I meant to say in terms of Trump and what I said.
Let me go back just a little bit. She's asking him, why isn't Hillary Clinton doing better? This was in the polls.
Is that he understands some things, able to connect with it. There's a lot of angst, pain, and hurt in this country. And he's saying, I understand what you're saying. So let me flip the question and take it a step further. Why isn't Hillary Clinton doing better?
Well, what I meant to say in terms of Trump and what I said is people are hurting in this country.
Yeah.
And the media has got to recognize it, and politicians have got to recognize it. People.
So do you guys see any similarities so far? We're not done yet. People are hurting in this country. Okay. This was 2016. I'm just showing you nothing has changed.
People watching the show today are worried about how they're going to pay their electric bill. They're worried about their children being able to go to college or paying off their student debt. They can't make it on $10 an hour. They're seeing their jobs go to China and Mexico, and they are angry and they're frustrated. And what Trump does is, okay, I see those problems, and really the cause of the problems is Muslims. The cause of the problems are Mexicans, and he is dividing us up. And the cornerstone of his campaign is bigotry, and I'm going to do everything I can to oppose that. What we have got to do, it seems to me, Mika, when we look at this presidential campaign, I understand people are not enamored with Trump, they're not enamored with Clinton, they weren't enamored with me. But what you got to do is look at the issues. If you are a working person, do you really think that billionaires need a large tax break, which is what Trump is proposing? If you are an ordinary American who listens to science, do you think it's a good idea that a president of the United States rejects science and says that climate change is a hoax when the scientists are telling us it's the great global crisis that we face?
Let's talk about the overt covert issue. So obviously, as I've said before, when you talk about the climate issue, yes, Donald Trump was overt in reference to the climate issue, saying we're bringing back plastic straws. Who cares? It says that he doesn't believe in climate change. But here we are under a Biden presidency, and Joe Biden said that he would not issue drilling permits. Here we are with Joe Biden giving breaks to fossil fuel companies. Yes, he had climate legislation, but in that legislation, he also gave breaks to the fossil fuel companies. That's why people like Joe Manchin approved it. That's why people like Joe Manchin voted for it. So again, one is overt and one is covert, but they both doing the bidding of what works for the corporations. And that's what people really have to understand. Bernie points out the obvious. He points out the covert. Bernie doesn't point, the overt. Bernie does not point out the covert. Let's continue.
So I think that if you look at the issues, raising the minimum wage, rebuilding our infrastructure, expanding healthcare, not cutting healthcare as Trump wants to do, Clinton by far is the superior candidate.
Joe, jump in.
Bernie, of course, you get no fight from Mika and a lot of people around the sets with everything that you just said. But if bigotry is the cornerstone of his campaign, as a lot of Americans, a lot of Democrats, a lot of reporters believe, why is Hillary Clinton having so much trouble with millennials, a group that in the Democratic side, you were beloved with millennials? Why are they splitting more towards Trump than they did towards? We're having a hard time getting our arms around it. What is it?
So listen to this, guys. This is important. He's asking, why is it that Hillary's struggling with millennials? Why is it so close? They were talking about the polling numbers at this point in time. Listen to what Bernie Sanders says. This is very important. Now think about what he just mentioned, that whole speech about people struggling in this country, yada, yada. Now listen to Bernie's response to that question.
Why were you able to connect so well with millennials, and why is Hillary so bad at connecting with millennials?
Joe, that's a fair question, and I honestly don't know the answer.
That's a damn lie. See, this is why I like to go back and play these older clips just to show you guys we've been gaslit all along. Listen to this. Now, Bernie say he don't know.
Splitting more towards Trump than they did towards. We're having a hard time getting our arms around it. What is it? Why were you able to connect so well with millennials, and why is Hillary so bad at connecting with millennials?
Joe, that's a fair question, and I honestly don't know the answer.
Okay, so Bernie Sanders just told you he doesn't know the answer as to why he was able to connect with millennials, and Hillary Clinton was struggling to do so at that point in time. After he just gave you a big old speech about how people were struggling because of student loan debt, right? The prices, people were dealing with the medical costs, healthcare costs in this country. Bernie Sanders just sat up there and lied back then. Now, I didn't catch this during this time. These are the things I wish I would have paid closer attention to. But Bernie Sanders knew exactly why millennials were not appealing to Hillary Clinton, because of the things that he just told you, because she was not being vocal towards the working class. The fact that Hillary Clinton decided to look over the Rust Belt, the fact that she talked down to the working class people and felt like she just had an in because she already had it in with Goldman Sachs. She already had it in with her colleagues in the House and the Senate. She had already been selected prior to her run in 2016. So she felt like she didn't really have to speak to the working class people. She didn't really have to speak to young people. But Bernie Sanders just sat right there and gaslight the entire audience and told people that he doesn't know why millennials are not appealing to Hillary Clinton. Let's continue.
But this is what I do know. In politics, too much we look at personality. We like you, we don't like you. And I think we got to back away from that and say, we're not looking at Trump or Clinton, we're looking at the needs of the American people. And if you just go down the list in terms of experience, but also in terms of views on the issue. I worked with Clinton, Joe, at the end of the campaign on higher education. And what we concluded, and she is public on this, and will make it happen, is that every family in America of 125,000 or less, that's 83% of our people, will be able to send their kids to a public college or university tuition free. You know what, Joe? That's pretty good. That is pretty damn good. Yeah. Clinton wants to raise taxes on the rich at a time of massive income and wealth inequality. Trump wants to give huge tax breaks to billionaires. That's wrong. So
I do not believe that Hillary Clinton was ever really going to raise taxes on the rich, so to speak. Again, those are her donors. Those are her friends. Now we're going to go to another clip here from this same interview that I also think is very telling. Or did I start at that piece yet? Or, oh yeah, let me go back to that. Oh yeah, I didn't finish that part. Sorry. I went into that clip, so I don't need that one. So listen to this still. Let me add this back.
I would just simply say to the millennials, to anybody else, look at the issues. Don't get hung up on Trump's kids or whatever the story of the birther issue. Stay focused on the issues of relevance to your life. I think Clinton is far and away the superior candidate.
So if you stay focused on the issues that are relevant and important to your life, why are you telling people today to support Joe Biden? Because the issues that are relevant and important to people's life, that would be Cornel West's campaign. So Bernie Sanders, like, he don't really care about the policies, so to speak. He's just there to support the Democratic Party and to try to trick young people that the Democratic Party is changing for them and to funnel in the next generation of Democrat supporters. Now, listen to this piece here. We're going to go to these guys, these gentlemen here. And this is where the Jill Stein issue is brought up. And there's something I want to show you in reference to this chart that they show.
Number of young voters, like a third, are voting for third-party candidates, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, you know, they don't remember Ralph Nader, right? They don't remember the effect that can have on a general election with the two-party candidates. So what?
They still keep bringing up Ralph Nader, and it's just hilarious to me. I want to show you this before they continue. Look at this. 2016 general election among voters under 30. 31% Hillary Clinton. 26% Gary Johnson. We're going to come back to Gary. 26% Donald Trump. 10% Jill Stein. Gary Johnson had 26% support at this point in time. And Gary Johnson, as a libertarian, his race was actually a big deal. Till this day, if you look it up, till this day, Gary Johnson had the most successful race as a libertarian presidential candidate to date. But they never mention him. They never bring this guy up when they talk about spoilers. I don't hear Republicans saying, even back then, I didn't hear Republicans saying, oh no, Gary Johnson is the spoiler. I didn't hear people saying, oh no, Gary Johnson, you're going to stop Donald Trump. But Democratic Party constantly focused on this 10% here from Jill Stein among the younger people. Do you see the comparison here, guys? Let them continue.
What is your pitch to them?
Good. I mean, that's a very good question. And I think the answer is, look, I was a third-party candidate. I began my career running as a third party, getting 2% of the vote. And then I got 1% of the vote. So I know a little bit about third party. I'm the longest-serving independent in the history of the U.S. Congress. But I think that before you cast a protest vote, because either Clinton or Trump will become president, think hard about it.
See that? Before you cast a protest vote.
This is not a governor's race. It's not a state legislative race. This is the presidency of the United States. And I would say to those people out there who are thinking of the protest vote, think about what the country looks like and whether you're comfortable of 4 years of a Trump presidency. And I would suggest to those people, let us elect Hillary Clinton as president. And the day after, let us mobilize millions of people around the progressive agenda, which, by the way, was passed, as you know, in the Democratic platform. We worked very hard on that, the most progressive platform in the history of American politics, and say to Secretary Clinton, let us work together to implement that platform.
He's still saying the same thing now. See how nothing has changed? Same thing now. Go ahead, vote for Hillary Clinton. And then after she's elected, we'll rally behind her and get her to push. We'll push Hillary Clinton left to get her to push these and pass these progressive policies. Same thing with Joe Biden. Go ahead and vote for Joe Biden. And we're going to push Joe Biden left. You see how this doesn't change? This is who Bernie Sanders is. He's never really going to be this revolutionary that he claimed he was in terms of a political revolution. How you gonna have a political revolution and you tell people to just go ahead and vote for your opponent that you told to push back against because they're corporate? So how are you gonna fight corporate greed if you have a base of supporters out there that you're telling to go ahead and support the candidate with the corporate greed? You can't. And Bernie Sanders knows that. He said we got to mobilize around what? Where was the mobilization? Where was the mobilization? Bernie, if I lose, I'll be outside with my people. What happened to that? None of those things happened. So you're going to hear more of this type of rhetoric from Bernie Sanders. Again, that was 2016. He's still saying the same thing. Different presidential candidate, same message from Bernie Sanders. Every time you try to take a step forward to progressivism or some type of political revolution, a real one, Bernie Sanders is always going to be just a step behind you to pull you back to keep things just the way they are. And I say that with my whole chest. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you, the Vulture Vanity Show. How much do you want to bet the lasers will be readied just like in Maui if she doesn't cave in and sell disgraceful? That was in reference to the 93-year-old woman. Thank you, Sparky. Sabrina, you're so beautiful and insightful. Love your show. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. And I love the puppy in the snow. And thank you for this one as well. At least they didn't burn out the Hilton Head lady yet, like in Maui. Yeah, Pasta is actually on the ground in Maui, you guys. I don't know if you've seen his post on Twitter, but he's been reporting a lot of information from the residents, which I got to bring Pasta back on to talk about that. Thank you, Fully Laden Swallow. This Bernie is such a far cry from the Bernie I saw confront Greenspan back in 2015. I remember that. JB says, I'm proud of this analogy, Sabs. I'm JB and I approve this message. Thank you, JB. I'm working on it. And I'm working on my analogies. I'm trying. JB is the king of analogies, though. And thank you, DC. Raising Social Security benefits, ? Psh, the Biden regime raised the retirement age. There you go. These are all things that we should remember come next year, right? We're going to move away from electoral politics for just a second to talk about this story here. There was a video that went viral on Twitter of a young woman in the hospital saying that she was actually, I guess, punched in the face with a brick. Now, some of you may be wondering, why is this news? People have already been divided over this story. Now, I'm glad I waited to discuss it because I do have more information about it today. First, I'm going to show you the video of what happened right after the incident. We'll work our way up to the hospital video, and then I'm going to show you what happened in reference to the bystanders. Because apparently this woman here says the woman who was assaulted on IG before and after the incident. So this is coming from Paris. So this woman here apparently was at a nightclub, and a man asked her for her phone number and she said no. This is her side of the story. We'll get more in a minute. Apparently, after she said no, he decided to punch her in the face with a brick. So the video that went viral is of her in the hospital talking about what happened. But let's see right outside the nightclub first when everything started to go cray. And then we're going to have a larger discussion here about when is it okay for people to intervene, because there were bystanders, there were men there, and her complaint is, why didn't they jump in? There are also people pushing back against this woman, saying that they feel that she deserved it because she tends to, I guess, antagonize people. Let's start with this video first.
Man, just watch, and they don't give a fuck. Yeah, this man hit me, fucking grabbed a rock, and he hit me in my fucking face because I would have given him my number. And all y'all just fucking watch. Y'all see that shit? Y'all see that shit? What y'all gonna do? I want y'all to be a man. I want y'all to be a man and fucking do something. Y'all gonna let a man hit me in my face? Man, fuck all y'all niggas.
Okay, let's pause here because then that goes to music. So she was talking to the men that were standing, I guess they were the bystanders, so to speak. And she's asking, why did you just stand there and let him hit me with a brick in my face? Now, here's the video that went viral. So I want to play this for you here.
Life to deserve this. I never did anything in my life to hurt anybody. Literally, a man asked me for my number. I said no, and he picked up a brick in front of so many men and was like, what you gonna do? And I told all these men, like, yo, why this man got a brick on my face? And he's holding a brick, and all these niggas is watching, and nobody does nothing. And he hits me in my face, and then they all just watch. And they let that nigga get in a car. How is this okay? This is what y'all doing to women? Life to deserve.
Okay, so you can see her face there. So you can see what it looks like, obviously, like after being hit with the brick. The question that has been raised is, why didn't the bystanders step in? Why didn't they do anything? Why didn't they try to protect her? You know, so forth and so forth. But also the issue of being asked for your number and saying no, and that is the response that you receive. Now, that's her side of the story. There's two sides to the story, and we're going to look at the other side as well. Listen to this. Now, this is from one of the bystanders. So the villain who won said that was fast. On TikTok, they found one of the bystanders. So I want you to hear the other side of the story because, again, to be fair, we need to hear both sides. Listen to this.
We finally hear from one of the guys who was there when the girl got hit by the brick for not giving her number up. I think he's a Somalia guy who's, you know, from the same neighborhood or whatever, because he said everybody in that community knows that she's a troublemaker. And he even said if it happened again, he would not do nothing again. So check it out. Tell me what y'all think.
I was one of the guys who was there that did not help her when she was getting hit with the brick, right? I feel like people need to know the whole story before they start commenting and say things they don't understand or they don't know. You guys don't even remember who you guys are trying to defend, who you guys are trying to speak up for. This is the same woman that was going around smacking white people in the streets. She's not innocent. She was actually taunting the guy to hit her. Why would I go defend somebody that's actually looking for trouble? This woman, she is literally a troublemaker. Everybody that knows her in our community knows she's a troublemaker.
So let me pause there for a second. He said that this woman was also walking around the street, and I'm going to show you the video, walking around the street, going up to white people and just slapping them in the face. Right? But still, there's the side of that story that you need to hear as well. So let me let him finish, because now a lot of people are arguing about this online. Some people are taking her side. Some people are taking, you know, his side, the bystander side, and the side of the gentleman who hit her with the brick.
This woman, she is literally a troublemaker. Everybody that knows her in our community knows she's a troublemaker. I'm not going to risk my life over somebody that's actually out there looking for trouble. If you go on social media, online, you're going to see some of her antic videos, taunting people, looking for a reaction. Well, she got what she been looking for, and you guys are giving her the attention that she was actually seeking for. I don't regret not standing up for her. If you look at some of the videos, I was there. I don't regret nothing whatsoever. I don't regret standing up for her. I'm not saying she deserved it. I'm not saying that any men have a right to hit a woman, especially with a brick. Nobody deserves that. But at the end of the day, there's more to the story. She's not as innocent as she's trying to portray herself to be. She wants attention. She's an attention-seeker woman. She's trying to go viral, and you guys have given her what she wanted. Yes, she did get hit by a brick. Yes, I saw it. Yes, I was standing by doing nothing. And if that shit happened again in the same circumstances, I will watch. Because she's not as innocent as she portrays herself to be. She was taunting the guy. She was calling him all type of names. She was degrading him to a point where he resulted in picking up a brick and hitting him.
So let me ask you guys a question. Now we've resorted to the point where if someone calls you names, though, it's okay to have the response of hitting them with a brick. A brick? Do you know what a brick can do to someone? Like, she's alive. She's in the hospital. Her face is swole, but you could actually, like, she's probably might be a little bit concussed after that, but you could accidentally kill somebody by hitting them with a brick. What would have been the response then? Let me let him finish.
I don't condone that type of behavior, but once again, she's not as innocent as she portrays herself to be. I literally, I remember a while back, she's posting videos going around in public, literally smacking old white people in the face. For what? And now you get hit by a brick, and now you want to cry wolf? And I don't care. You wanted trouble, you got trouble. That's why I'll still buy and watch. So don't, oh man, that whole situation got me upset.
Okay, so let's go into this discussion here where he said that she was smacking people in the face. I do want to, we're going to be fair here. We're going to see what this is about. Now, to be clear, from what I understand, this is a skit. And this is where some of the disagreement is, like that she has these videos where she smacks people in the face. But from what I have read from people, this is a skit, a series of skits that she does. So I don't know if those people are in on this or not, and they just make it look like it's random. You guys have seen people do those skits before where like they'll just go up to someone and do something stupid and they make it seem like it's random, but that person's actually a part of it. So tell me what you think. This is one of the videos that they were talking about. This is her. Watch this.
You ever fuck with Brianna ever again? You ever fuck with Brianna ever again?
Okay, so that's one of the videos that people are circulating around on Twitter. That's one of the videos that people are talking about. to me, hold on, let me just go forward. Where's that guy? See, this is one of those things where I wonder, did she actually hit him? Sure. Yeah, see, this is why I think, what is it, Saul? She didn't hit him. It didn't look like she actually hit him to me. Now, the person who shared this video, actually, let me come out here. I'll show you what they said. Brick scandal. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at is a video of a Somali woman walking up to a random white man and slapping him in the face. Yes, folks, this is the same Somali woman who claims she was slapped in the face with a brick by a black man. Well, I did some fact checking. This is a Somali immigrant who is most known in the city of Houston for being a self-proclaimed lesbian who spills vile, misandrous talking points and hate speech. Okay. Point one, the Somali woman claims that a black man threw the brick at her face and that black men failed to stop or capture the assailant and that they failed to defend her honor. Let's be abundantly clear. This woman was attacked by an African immigrant, and the men standing back and standing by were all African. This had nothing to do with foundational Black Americans. We weren't involved. Okay, I get that. I get what they're saying, but at the same time, I'm just like, look. Point two, in a series of other TikTok videos, she is seen berating, harassing, and assaulting innocent white men by getting in their faces and yelling at them, followed by slapping them in the face. While I don't support hitting anyone in the face with a brick, but this woman makes it incredibly hard to defend or protect people like her. And here's the question that I have for the audience. If this is a series of skits, based on what I've read, she does these skits, which means the people either could be in on it or she pretends to slap them and she's not actually slapping them. You have to sometimes separate the two. What does that have to do with her being asked for her phone number and telling the guy no and him choosing to hit her in the face with a brick? Do you see how this is? This person points this out so well. And this is exactly what I was thinking. I saw this tweet. Uju Anya. Listen to this. I think she hit the nail on the head. Black men pulling stuff from a black woman's social media they claim shows she didn't deserve protection when a black man smashed her in the face with a brick for not giving him her number. Same thing white supremacists do after cops murder black people to claim they deserve to die. What this reminded me of, and I don't know if she's charged him or not, if she filed a police report or not, I don't know. But what this reminded me of is the fact that people went back. Let's go back in her history, her social media history, and find out dirt on her. That reminds me of the police brutality cases where people will go back and try to find history from the victim, whether it's their social media, etc., to actually make the victim look worse. People did that with George Floyd and other victims of police brutality, right? So the question then is, when is it important to separate the past from the present in reference to incidents? And two, what does one have to do with the other? Again, I want to remind people, they're saying that he asked her for her number and she said no. Regardless if she called him names or not, that warrants a brick to the face. This is something to think about. Does that work? Because my thing is this, I'm not a violent person. I don't just go up and smack people in the face or hit people or anything like that. People say words to me. People say things to me that are very vile. I don't hit these people. So it's just something to think about here again. Like I said, even the gentleman who came forward, the guy who's the bystander, even he admits she didn't hit him. Even he admits, yeah, she said some things to him. And so he hit her with a brick. And yeah, I just stood there because she is a problem in the community. He even admitted, I'm not saying that she deserved it. So if she didn't deserve to be hit with the brick, why are people arguing with each other about this on social media? And people are. Something to think about, guys. Something to think about. I'm looking at some of the comments. This is hilarious. It's just, what's that, Mercy? You can't just talk crazy to some people. Yeah, I understand that. But a brick? What would the conversation be like if she died? You can die from a brick. Ay. What was that about the fake number? Someone mentioned, Lee said, give a fake phone number. Yeah, I used to give people fake numbers. But the thing is that why should you even have to give out a fake number though? Why can't you just say no and that be it? Thank you. Yesem says, just like Brianna Joy said, you do have ideological consistency and it is very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Yesem. And another cute puppy. JB says, what I heard, some guys were like, she was antagonizing the man. My point is, even if she verbally said stuff, it doesn't give anyone the right to put their hands on someone. She didn't touch him. Very interesting. Very interesting. What's this? Whoever said you should stand up for yourself and get away as soon as you can. Mazana says, Your Honor, she said, I have small PP. I had to smack her with a brick. You know what, Mazana? You Oh no. Okay. It's time to move on to the next story. Oh God. Notori said, I'm gonna be honest, if somebody in my face and running their mouth, I'm pulling out one or two things, my gun or my bear spray. Bear spray? Are there bears near you, Notori? This is something we can talk about this on call-in tonight when people call in. Okay, let's go into this next story here with Russell Brand. I do want to make sure I touch on this issue here with Ukraine. So Tucker Carlson recently had an interview and Russell Brand exposed this. I didn't see the Tucker Carlson interview, and unfortunately, I can't show some of the Tucker Carlson interviews. I can't show on here because of copyright. Sorry, guys. But so I didn't want to take a chance with this one. But this is through like Russell Brand's thing, so we should be okay. But there is a narrative here in reference to Ukraine that I think the masses is continuing to believe. I think it's starting to change a little bit. And that's the narrative that Ukraine can win. And I think since day one, those of us at RBN have been saying they can't win. They can't beat Russia. And if Russia ever needed some help, they can knock on their next door neighbor's door, which is China, and say, come help us out. So we've been saying for a long time, they can't win. Now, these videos with Tucker get millions of views, more views than his segment on Fox News used to get. Now we have a gentleman sitting down with Tucker Carlson admitting that they can't win. Listen to this. Let's dive right in. We start off with Russell getting right into the thick of it.
It's going to be a fantastic show. There's only a few of them. They're all in September. Join me by clicking the link in the description now. The war between Russia and Ukraine shows no sign of ending and indeed is escalating, funded yet still by American taxpayer dollars. Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, had a conversation with Tucker in which he said that Joe Biden's approach and prognosis are deceptive, dishonest, and just plain wrong. That there's no situation in which Ukraine can ever defeat beat Russia. Now, Viktor Orban is a controversial figure. Many people say he's like right-wing and that he's a dictator and all sorts of negative stuff. And I wonder if we're at a point where we have to learn to separate and distinguish between people's cultural analysis of different political figures and the truth about war, particularly a conflict like this one between Russia and Ukraine, which has almost limitless potential to escalate and could literally involve everybody in the world eventually. So let's have a look at that conversation between Tucker and Viktor Orban and note these points. He says the only way to end this conflict is by electing Donald Trump. That's extraordinary when you've got people on the left saying that if Trump ever gets elected, he'll be president for life. He'll never rescind the office. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to America. And note as well that he says that this is ultimately an unwinnable war. Ukraine can never beat Russia. That side of it seems a lot less controversial to me. Let's have a look at the conversation.
The view is that Ukraine is winning this war. It doesn't sound like that's true.
No, it's a lie. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's a lie.
So I do just want to add in here really quick for those who may not have heard this commentary before. But one thing I did mention a couple weeks ago, I did show a clip from CNN where Anderson Cooper actually finally did acknowledge that they were losing. So just FYI.
It's impossible. Everybody who's in politics and understand the logic, the figures, the data, no way.
Why is it impossible?
Because that way, the poor Ukrainians die every day.
Yes.
Hundreds and thousands, So my heart is with them.
An early question to ask yourself is, do you think that propaganda is a one-way street? Or do you imagine that all sides use propaganda to convey the favorable perspective, to bolster a narrative that is favorable to their agenda? The establishment propaganda currently is Ukraine are winning this war. Ultimately, Ukraine will be triumphant. But I feel that those of us that have been alive a little while and been watching the news for a while and have maybe taken a glance at history are aware that Russia are a formidable foe and a nuclear superpower at that. The idea that Russia can be defeated, that there's ever going to be a sort of a white flag moment from Putin is ridiculous. So whatever your perspective is on Viktor Orban, whatever your perspective is on Tucker, whatever your perspective is on Donald Trump, almost you have to look at this conflict in isolation and assess it. What's likely to happen here? Who benefits from this escalating war? Who benefits from us being told, oh, Ukraine will win? And one way of diagnosing this beyond our own personal prejudices and biases is to look at what we were told at the beginning of this conflict and what we are being told now.
Pause there for just a second. I just want to say something else to add in here. The other thing that I was going to add is, and if they can't win, then is the goal mainly to create another never-ending war that you continue to funnel money through? I don't know about you, but I don't want another 20-year Afghanistan. Is that the goal? They're telling you that they can't win and we're continuing to send them weapons, then we're looking at the possibility of another never-ending war, a prolonged war. That's something to think about.
What were we told at the very start? How long it would last, what it would cost, what the likely outcomes are, and have those things proven to be true?
So it's tragedy. It's tragedy for Ukraine. But they will run out earlier from the soldiers, number of soldiers, than the Russians. What finally will count is boots on the ground. And the Russians are far stronger, far numerous, more numerous
There's more
than
of
Ukrainians.
Them. Many more.
And don't be surprised, do not be surprised if it's only a matter of time before the Biden administration says, well, Ukraine needs more help and we've been sending them weapons, so we got to send U.S. troops over there to get boots on the ground. That idea has already been discussed. And then you'll see we're entangled in, again, like I said, another Afghanistan. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
It's almost a historical cliche to cite that in the Napoleonic Wars, France were unable to ultimately conquer Russia because there are too many Russians. And in the Second World War, Hitler's armies were unable to conquer Russia because in the end, Stalin would just limitlessly use human resources to prevent Russia being overwhelmed. Is there a vision for what a Ukrainian victory looks like here? Is there a vision for, all right, and then there's the bit where Putin goes, bloody hell, enough's enough, okay, I surrender. There's a clear disjunct between what we're being told and the reality. So whatever propaganda is true from the sort of Russia today, Russian perspective, clearly there's propaganda on behalf of the Biden administration as well. Let's have a look at this in more detail. According to the Washington Post, Viktor Orban is Vladimir Putin's closest ally in the EU. He has refused to allow the transfer of Western weapons across Hungary's shared border with Ukraine and called for an immediate ceasefire and peace talks in the conflict, but without providing a vision of what that would mean for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Ukraine's territorial integrity is obviously important, but is now subject to complex diplomatic negotiations. And Viktor Orban, having already been smeared as a fascist and as a right-wing person and all the various things that you're probably aware of, I think has to be looked at separately from whether or not peace is the desired outcome and whether militarism is going to bring out a favourable solution for anyone. It's interesting to bring to the forefront the question of what a post-war Ukraine looks like, because we know that Zelensky's vision is deals with BlackRock, carve up Ukraine, make it a place that's impossible to unionise, where workers have minimal rights, and financial interests of the West are able to exploit the newly liberated, or at least newly colonized, Ukrainian territory. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. Zelensky's gone on the telly and said, thank you, BlackRock, for all of you. You know, that's when he's in.
But that's if they win, because here's the thing, if they, which we're already saying that they can't win. So when Ukraine loses, BlackRock is already invested apparently, but their economy is going to be in the pits after this, not considering the number of lives that they've lost. And what happens to Crimea? And this is why I question if this is meant to be a prolonged, never-ending war. And I say this because if they can't win, it's not like the US government is just going to say, okay, guys, they're not winning, they're not doing well. You know, we're going to have to talk with NATO to try to like just end this and just settle it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that would be admitting something to the American people that you should have admitted in the very beginning when you were lying to them and telling the American people that they could win when they couldn't. I think what's going to happen is I think they're going to try to prolong this as much as possible, at least as long as Biden's in office. Prolong it as much as possible, continuing to give them weapons, continuing to give them money and aid. And then I think it's only inevitable it's going to get to a certain point where either we're going to have a change in leadership in the White House, meaning bringing in someone who wants to get this conflict, wants to basically get rid of this conflict and wants to call for peace negotiation. That would also be rather difficult because the powers that be, military industrial complex and corporations, actually want this war to continue. So they may even try to make it so that no one like that will get into the White House during this time. It reminds me of what happened after September 11, right? And I remember, you know, Bush running for a second term. And I remember how close Al Gore came. But we can talk about that another time, maybe on call in, not on here, because I would be careful how to talk about that election. But what I will say is that it was very apparent to me that the powers that be, the military industrial complex and the corporations, really did not want someone else coming in during that time of this issue with Iraq. So that being said, if those powers that be do not allow someone to come into the White House who's going to get us out of this conflict, I do see this continuing to who knows how many years. And if that happens, are the American people going to finally be bold enough to call out the government and to call out the MIC for what it truly is and to call out this war? Or 5 years from now, are people still going to be flying Ukraine flags in their Twitter like bio saying, you can win, you can do it? Let's continue.
In America, that's what they're talking about. So the vision they're presenting is a globalist, corporatist post-war Ukraine. Now, I don't think that the vision for how Ukraine is organized is any of my business, and I'm sure a lot of you share that opinion, in which case, why are American taxpayers paying for this conflict that appears to be leading to a vision that's globalist and corporatist, you could say, certainly on the basis of the BlackRock deal and the basis of Ukrainian workers aren't going to have the right to unionize. Doesn't seem very pro-Ukrainian to me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Fresh from a trip to Kiev, Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal is arguing that the US is getting its money's worth in Ukraine Ukraine because Russia is taking losses and no Americans are dying, showing a lack of concern for Ukrainian lives. How many of you thought that when this conflict began, what we're ultimately seeing is the evolution of the American war model, where supporting foreign territories in their conflict against American enemies is preferable to wars where American troops are going to be involved and ultimately killed. Even Americans who have no particular interest in freedom and independence in democracies worldwide should be satisfied that we're getting our money's worth on our Ukraine investment, Blumenthal wrote in the Connecticut Post. That's a pretty cynical way of discussing a conflict which is leading to death and decimation in a country that really doesn't evolve America, except for, I would argue, their economic and imperialist interests. For less than 3% of our nation's military budget, we've enabled Ukraine to degrade Russia's military strength by half, all without a single American servicewoman or man injured or lost, he added. I would say that that's a pretty cynical outlook and reveals plainly what the mentality is. We're fighting a proxy war using Ukrainian lives. It's an investment. We're depleting the resources of our enemy. That's not what we were told at the beginning. We were told that it's a criminal invasion by Putin. We have to defend Ukraine. Put a flag in your window, that it was a moral crusade. The argument has become...
That's what we were told. And we've been told these things oftentimes before with other wars. And the thing is, they just want to weaken Russia economically. They do want to implement regime change. They want to overthrow Vladimir Putin. And people have to really grasp that. The sad thing is the majority of Americans have no idea that this is happening. The majority of Americans just know that Russia invaded Ukraine and we got to fight back against big, bad Russia. I've watched the way that Russia has been depicted, whether it's been movies or TV shows and I've never seen it portrayed in a positive light, not in this country. So it's easy to push that propaganda on the American people when this is all they know, about Russia, right? Most Americans are not going to look further and deeper into this war, although I will say some are starting to push back in reference to the amount of money that's being sent to Ukraine. Maybe that could be the driving force to wake people up.
A common talking point among hawks in Washington who want the US to keep fueling the proxy war against Russia. Senator Mitt Romney recently called the conflict the best national defense spending I think we've ever done. We're losing no lives in Ukraine and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically against Russia, Romney said. We're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money. A weakened Russia is a good thing. So I suppose at least the agenda is becoming explicit. This is a proxy war where we avoid the unpopular event of American lives being lost. Post-Vietnam, it has been decreed that America should not get involved in foreign wars that are none of their business because American families don't like to see their loved ones returning in body bags. The Middle Eastern conflicts, notably Iraq, seemed like an attempt to reboot that foreign policy model, sending American troops to countries that to some degree are none of their business, and certainly wars that are not undertaken for the reasons that were offered at the war's inauguration. This, though, seems like a pretty refined model. No Americans are going to die. American taxpayers are going to pay for it, but Ukrainians are going to do the dying on your behalf, and American opponents are going to be weakened. It still, for me, seems like something that should be subject to democratic process. Whether or not you want to fund ongoing foreign wars is something I'd like a yes-no tick to. Despite the...
Oftentimes what I don't see happen, like I want more people to interview the Ukrainian people. And not the media people, right? Not the people that are a part of Zelensky's, regime there, but just the everyday Ukrainian people on the street and ask them how they feel about what's happening. And it's unlikely that we'll see that type of footage unless it's an improved narrative that mainstream media wants. But like I said, it's getting to the point now where they have to actually admit that there are some losses here in reference to what's happening with Ukraine. And I just wonder how long mainstream media is going to be able to keep up this facade. You got to think back to when I was younger and the war in Iraq happened. One thing you got to remember, we didn't have social media back then. Boop. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. No Snapchat. Is that still a thing? No tickety talk. None of that. Now you have social media. And especially if you go on TikTok, there are people that are creating these videos and giving people a different perspective in reference to this particular conflict. And that's what I'm saying. That could be part of the reason why more Americans are not happy with the amount of money that's going over there to Ukraine, because social media is showing you a perspective that mainstream media is not telling you. So that's something you got to keep in mind. We did not have social media when September 11 happened, and we did not have social media when the war in Iraq happened. So you got to keep in mind, just think about that.
Lack of success on the battlefield, the Biden administration and most members of Congress want to keep funding the war, which they acknowledge would not continue without US support. So it's a war that would stop if you stopped paying for it. As Zelensky is frank and forthcoming to say, Ukraine could not have survived without America and our allies, Blumenthal said. But his counteroffensive is far from an assured success. In the end, the only way he loses is if America pulls the plug. I don't think anyone's advocating for abandoning Ukraine to the horrors of war, but America could use their considerable might to advance the diplomatic process. Even Donald Trump, in his most cavalier announcement, said, I would say, negotiate now, come to a solution around the disputed ethnic territories, or we're going to arm Ukraine to the teeth ad infinitum. Even that suggests that there is a diplomatic outcome is favoured, that peace should be the prize that all sides are pulling towards. The Washington Post recently reported that US intelligence has determined Ukraine's counteroffensive will fail to meet its main objective of severing Russia's land bridge to Crimea. Despite the conclusion, US is pushing Ukrainian commanders to go harder on the battlefield and complaining that Ukraine has become too casualty averse. Leading up to the counteroffensive, the Discord leaks and other media reports showed the US did not believe Ukraine could regain significant territory. But the Biden administration still pushed for the assault and rejected the idea of a ceasefire. Never mind these hypocritical, corrupt propagandist wars. They're getting on my nerves and they're bringing me down. You know, cheer me up. Stickers, delicious stickers.
And we'll go ahead and pause and stop it there. And one thing I want to add as well was, like, if they really did care about the lives of the Ukrainian people, then they would push for peace. Because the longer the war prolongs, the more people are going to die. And that's just a reality with any war. And it's weird to me that more people don't make that connection, that more people don't understand that, like, how can they say they're fighting for the lives of the Ukrainian people when more Ukrainian people are dying? It was the same way with the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. We see these images of people, whether it's through pictures, whether it's through independent journalists, but so many people are asleep. So many people still really believe, yeah, we got to take down Putin, as if that's the only part of the story. It's just interesting how so many people don't realize that there's two sides to a story when it comes to war and when it comes to our media. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. All right. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Did you know the Ukrainian Nazi Azov battalion is blowing through more artillery than L&M, Raytheon, Gen Dynamics, and other armed manufacturers can produce? That is interesting. It does not surprise me. And thank you for this as well, Roger. Let's be real. This is all about discouraging nations from joining BRICS, Sabby. That too. Although I don't think Ukraine would join BRICS, to be honest, but I hear where you're coming from. Delthea says Ukraine can't win. That's why the U.S. is involved. Duh. That's right. Thank you, Sparky. Make Ukraine Russia again. Don't even leave a patch called Ukraine, or else it'll be a NATO playground. That's another thing we need to have a conversation about in reference to what's going to happen there, because they have asked to join NATO and Biden said no. Thank you, Sparky. Build a better world with BRICS. Thank you for this as well. Putin is an anti-globalist hero. Don't believe 20 straight years of anti-Putin lies and other propaganda. He's actually a righteous man. I think Putin has his flaws too. I don't think he's perfect. And thank you for this as well. The establishment wants to stretch out the Ukraine war long enough so they can blame Ukraine's failure on the next president stopping the funds. Interesting. And thank you for the super sticker, Alan. Thank you, David. Earliest negative depiction of Russia I recall is Boris and Natasha in Rocky and Bullwinkle. Whoa! I finally met someone else who used to watch that cartoon. You guys remember Robbie and Bullwinkle? As someone who embraces pop culture, it's hard not to see it. It's true. I still remember like Rocky IV. Remember Rocky IV? They did the same thing. They demonized Russia. And thank you for this as well, Sparky. The West has wanted a war in Ukraine for years to break up Russia like they did Yugoslavia, but Trump interrupted them. By the time the West provoked Russia, they were too strong to beat and break up. And I remember Yugoslavia. All right, guys, we are doing good on time tonight. I'm going to cover Utah ballot measure. They only had one ballot measure. And then we're going to hop on over to call-in. So we are going to do call-in tonight. There's lots to discuss. We can chat about it. Let's go ahead and bring up Utah ballot measures. Another state that I have never been to. Citizens of Utah may initiate legislation as either a direct or indirect state statute. In Utah, citizens also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. Citizens may not initiate constitutional amendments. The Utah state legislature, however, may place legislatively referred constitutional amendments on the ballot with a 2/3 majority vote of each chamber. But when put before the voters, only a simple majority of the vote is required. There is a single subject rule. In Utah, each proposed measure must address only one subject clearly expressed in the title. So most of the states I've covered so far do have this rule where you can't have like two different subjects as a part of one ballot measure. So just FYI. Restrictions. Any initiated measure that would allow, limit, or prohibit the taking of wildlife or the season for or method of taking wildlife requires a 2/3 supermajority in Utah. Competing initiatives. Utah law provides that in the event that two conflicting measures are approved, the measure with the most affirmative votes supersedes the other. The governor of Utah is responsible for determining whether two measures conflict. The decision can be appealed to the courts. Roger Meadows added here, they decided to let the government intervene on this. Number required to qualify to go on the ballot. For directly initiated statutes and veto referendums, proponents must gather signatures equal to 8% of the total number of active voters. For indirectly initiated statutes, it must be 4% of this number to qualify the initiative to go before the legislature, and an additional 4% to qualify for the ballot if the legislature does not approve the initiative. For ballot initiatives, each requirement must be met within at least 26 of the state's 29 Senate districts. For veto referendums, the requirement must be met within at least 15 of the state's 29 Senate districts. Distribution. For directly initiated state statutes, signatures must be collected from each of at least 26 of 29 Utah State Senate districts, equal to 8% of the active voters. For indirect initiatives, signatures must be collected from at least 26 of the 29 Utah State Senate districts, equal to 4%. If second round of signatures is collected, the signatures as a whole, equaling 8% of active voters, are subject to the requirement for direct initiatives. For referendum petitions, signatures must be collected from each of at least 15 of the 29 Senate districts in Utah, equal to 8% of active voters. Now, let's jump down to that first measure. I don't get into all the litigation stuff. They only had one measure in Utah. Utah constitutional amendment, emergency session appropriation limits measure, where a yes vote supported this constitutional amendment to increase the limit of appropriations the state legislature could make in an emergency session from 1% of the previous fiscal year's budget to 5%. Exempt emergency federal funding from the limit and exempt any appropriations that decrease total spending for the year from the limit. This measure failed by 63.67%. Yikes. Now, who supported it? State Representative Brad Last. Brad had an argument concerning the existing limits on the legislature during emergency special sessions and the sessions that were called in 2020 in response to the pandemic. What we learned in that process is that we didn't give ourselves enough flexibility. As you will recall, we had to call ourselves into special session several times in order to accomplish what we needed to accomplish last year. So we came to a little better understanding of emergency situation that might present itself. Last also said this last year, we had a 20 billion budget. When we called ourselves into special session, we were limited to adjustments of 200 million. That's a big difference. We realized after we've gone down the road a bit, we needed to do considerably more than that. And that's pretty much it for Utah. I have West Virginia left, and there may be one more I have to check. But once I'm done with the 2022 ballot measures, we're going to move forward to the 2024 measures that are coming up in your states. So that's going to be important. It'll be different from what I did this time around. This time I'm reporting the results. Next time, I'm going to tell you what's coming on the ballot, so you'll know ahead of time. So we'll be ahead of it this time, so you'll know and you'll be prepared, and it is what it is. So I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back. We're going to do call in, and it is what it is.
All right. This is where we give our Sabby a little break before we jump into call in. Here, let me adjust the screen a little. And let's take a peek at what we'll be talking about on the call-in. This one's called "Whoops, I'm Back," because yeah, Sabrina thought that that call-in was done, but as I like to call it, I think call-in is limping along, and we're still working on what will come next, and we'll see where all that lands. Let's see. Oh yeah. Let's chat about news and the bad faith interview. Yes. Oh yeah. So Sabrina had the interview, the conversation with Brianna Joy Gray. Definitely recommend. There's at least a 21-minute clip of that on YouTube that you can check out, and that was a really good combo. So we can talk about that. And oh yeah, the other thing I'm noticing is that Sabrina's really the biggest thing, like getting the most views on Colin right now. She's like the only one left who gets any views at all. Oh, gain too high. Actually, I can adjust that a little. Testing 1, 2, 3. Maybe that brought it down a little. I'm always worried about where the mic is. Audio's tough. All right, we got a super chat. This came in from Roger. Whoops, there it is. Whoops, there it is. All right, thanks for that, Roger. And we also had one in here from Radical Leftist Extremists. Saying, Sabby, Vanguard smeared you. Check it out. Yeah, nobody watches them, so it doesn't really matter. Oh, here's a new one. Let's see. Thanks for this super chat, Courtney Smith. Going back to Bernie, maybe Trump can give him a little lesson on mobilization. Oh yeah, it's never too late to pick up the saxophone again. Thanks for that super chat, Courtney. Sal says my audio is hot. Well, I guess it'll have to do for tonight. But let's see. Oh yeah, so my buddy David mentioned Rocky and Bullwinkle. Let's see. I found I found the picture. Here we go. There they are, old Rocky and Bullwinkle, and yeah, that's going back a long ways. And they used to be. Oh, and then there was Boris and Natasha. Yeah, were the Russians, and they were talking about how their plans were thwarted by moose and squirrels. So that's an old one. Let's see here. We got. Thanks for the super chat, Sparky. Remember, Putin warned the FBI about the Boston Marathon bombers, but they ignored him. Thanks for that super chat, Sparky. Yeah, so let me put the call-in link in the chat. So that's where the call-in is going to end up. And as usual, you can do call-in on your smartphone. You can do the app. For now, it still works. So, and I assume we'll get through the night on call-in. I think it's still kind of limping along, and we'll see. I mean, I assume eventually it'll disappear. You can also hit the link, bring call-in up on your browser. You can listen in. You can also participate. We always like to hear what you think. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about the war and the Ukraine war, and I always like to put in, all wars, especially the modern wars, are resource wars. It's all about the money, and it's not even necessarily that the war itself is to gain resources, though it very often is. But now, with a conflict like this Ukraine war, it's all about weapons sales. You have our government is owned, by billionaires, by huge corporations, and a big player in those huge corporations are the defense contractors, the old military industrial complex, and so they to say they have a bit of an influence in Washington is an understatement for sure. And so they want those weapons contracts. I mean, the U.S. now is the biggest arms dealer in the world by far, and so you don't get those big contracts, those big weapon sales coming through if you don't have wars, if you don't have tensions. And so that's the real driver of everything. It's straight up corruption. And then when you get to that point, I mean, it's about money. It's about the money flow going into DC. And, that's what you have to do something about. And if you don't do something about that money flow, I mean, it's just going to keep happening. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you elect if you don't fix that issue. Like, people talk about term limits, and I'm for term limits, but if that's all you do, then you just get a new set of so-called representatives in who get paid off instead. You need to cut the puppet strings, and that means dealing with the money. We need a mass movement that demands that we fix this, that we end the corruption, and that we have real solutions like campaign finance reform, like a move to amend style amendment where you fix the Constitution. So I was looking at the Massachusetts proposed ballot initiatives that are coming up for next year, and there was one that tried to deal with campaign finance, and it was dismissed and wasn't allowed by the Attorney General and Secretary of State's office because it would. The reason they gave is that the Supreme Court has said money is speech, and so if you and so this thing was regulating money, and they said, "Oh, you're regulating free speech, goes against First Amendment." So in other words, what I'm getting at is that you're not going to fix this unless you fix the Constitution at this point, or unless you do the systemic fix of amending the Constitution to say money is not speech, corporations are not people. And those are the kind of concrete solutions that we need to have in a movement and in a candidate. And of course, there's really only one candidate that comes close to that. Thanks for this super chat, Roger. Eric, why do you prefer type VNC over real VNC? Actually, I use both, Roger. We're getting into IT geek talk, but the VNC is the software we use to be able to control systems remotely. Let me see if I missed anybody here. Yeah, Roger's asking about type VNC now.
Oh yeah. I know. I had mentioned that to Bree too about like what we use, because it is a lot smoother than sharing your screen.
Nice Aspen Fallen. Appreciate that. All right, I think I covered everything. Yeah. So
Cool.
we'll see you out on the comments.
All right,
Oh,
guys,
did you
let's
see
get
Rocky
on.
and Bullwinkle?
I did. Yeah, I still
Right.
have my mom got me. I used to have like the Rocky and Bullwinkle VHS, like when I was a kid. Like I used to watch that all the time. Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Let's show them. There they are. All right, but we'll go to Colin. See you in there.
All right, guys, we are going to do call in. We'll hang in over there until I get this whole thing figured out. I might reach out to Do Dissidents and ask them how they have people call into their show, because they have people call into the YouTube part. So I might do that, but we'll figure it out. I got a lot going on right now, but right now we're going to head on over to call in episode 123. Whoops, I'm back. We can talk about news. We can talk about the Bad Faith interview. So let's do that. That link is pinned to the top of the chat. So I'll see you guys over there. And other than that, have a good night. Keep up the fight.